You are resting right now. Or at least, that's what you told yourself when you pressed play. But notice what else is happening. Part of your mind is already cataloging this, filing it, tagging it as useful. You found a video about productivity, or the critique of it, and that counts, doesn't it? That's doing something. That's not wasted time. You didn't just sit down in silence. You haven't done that in a while. Think about the last time you were genuinely idle. Not reading, not watching something informative, not journaling or meditating with an app, timing your breath. Not taking a walk while feeding your ears, just still. Nowhere to be. Nothing to improve. For most people, that moment is genuinely difficult to locate. And the strange part isn't that life got busy. The strange part is that somewhere along the way, the feeling of doing nothing started to feel dangerous, like debt accumulating, like a warning light you were choosing to ignore. That feeling has a name, and it isn't laziness. It's the quiet tyranny of productivity. And it has moved so far inside you that it doesn't need a boss or a deadline anymore. It runs on its own. To understand what's happening to you now, you have to go back, not to your childhood, not to your job, but to a specific shift in how modern economies decided to measure human worth. For most of recorded history, leisure was considered the mark of a cultivated life. The ancient Greek concept, translated loosely as schole, described a kind of purposeless, unhurried time that philosophers considered essential to wisdom. Rest wasn't the opposite of a good life. It was part of the definition. That began to change with industrialization. When labor became hourly, time became quantifiable. Hours not spent producing were hours lost. The economist and sociologist Thorstein Veblen wrote in the late 19th century about what he called conspicuous consumption. But he also documented how the rising industrial class began to define idleness as moral failure, a thing to be ashamed of rather than aspired to. Work ethic became identity. Then something subtler happened in the 20th century. As economies shifted from manufacturing to knowledge work, the boundary between work and not work began to dissolve. A factory worker could leave the floor and genuinely stop working. A knowledge worker carries the work in their head. There's no whistle. There's no floor. Sociologist Arlie Hochschild documented what she called the time bind in her research during the 1990s. The experience of time feeling scarce, even as technology promised to give it back. People were working more, not less, and the hours they weren't working were increasingly colonized by anxiety about the hours they were. Then came the devices. The smartphone didn't just give you access to your inbox. It gave the logic of work access to every room in your life. The bedroom, the bathroom, the dinner table. Researchers at the University of Texas found in 2017 that simply having your phone visible on a surface, even face down, even silent, measurably reduced your available cognitive capacity. The brain, aware of the potential demand, never fully released. You never fully released. And into that partial release, productivity culture moved. Somewhere in the last decade, rest itself became a genre. Sleep optimization, recovery protocols, mindfulness apps with streak counters, books on strategic napping, journals designed to maximize morning clarity, podcasts exactly like this one, consumed during walks or commutes as a way to make movement more efficient. None of these things are bad in isolation. But notice the grammar. Notice who is in charge. In every case, rest is not something you do for its own sake. It is something you do in order to perform better. Recovery is a means. Efficiency is the end. Philosopher Joseph Pieper wrote about this in the mid-20th century. The idea, he argued, that the modern world had turned leisure into a tool, robbing it of the very quality that made it restorative. When rest is instrumental, when it serves productivity, It is no longer rest. It is unpaid preparation for more work. Cognitive scientist and philosopher Evan Thompson, drawing on phenomenological traditions, has written about the way the self requires genuine unstructured time, not to recharge, but simply to be. The self is not a battery. The metaphor of recharging is itself a productivity metaphor, and it's quietly doing damage. Because if you rest in order to perform, then poor performance becomes evidence that you rested wrong. The guilt doesn't end. It just changes clothes. And this is where the tyranny becomes most subtle. You internalized the overseer. You no longer need an external authority to tell you that lying in the grass for an hour is wasteful. The voice is already in the room. It sounds like yours. There is a version of yourself that knows how to do nothing. You were born with it. Developmental psychologists observe that children in genuine free play, unstructured, without instructional purpose, engage in something qualitatively different from structured activity. They're not building skills. They're not learning resilience. They're simply present in a way that requires no justification. That capacity doesn't disappear in adults. It gets buried. Neuroscientist Mary Helen Imodino-Yang and her colleagues have published work on what happens in the brain during undirected mind wandering, what neuroscientists call default mode network activity. This isn't downtime in the pejorative sense. This is when the brain consolidates identity, processes moral complexity, builds coherent narrative from experience. It is, in a measurable sense, when you become more fully yourself. Optimize that away. And you're not becoming more productive. You're becoming less whole. The cost doesn't always show up as burnout, though it does show up there. It also shows up as a pervasive flatness, a difficulty feeling genuine pleasure in things that aren't going anywhere, a sense that you're always slightly behind a version of yourself that's more prepared, more caught up, more ready to be present in the life that keeps deferring. You keep deferring. And the tyranny is so quiet that most people blame themselves for the deferral. They reach for another productivity system, another journal, another framework for managing their one wild life. The system stays intact. Here is the hard part. There is no productivity hack for this. Intentionally, this video will not give you a 5-step plan for better rest. That would be the same mechanism wearing a different mask. What it can give you is a question, a single question that functions as a kind of compass. When you're about to do something, anything, ask yourself, would I do this if it led to nothing? Not literally nothing, but no improvement, no skill, no status, no story to tell, no metric to log. If the answer is yes, you've found something that is actually yours. If the answer is hesitation, that hesitation is data. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote, in the 17th century, before smartphones, before hustle culture, before morning routines, that all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He was pointing at something that predates capitalism, predates industrialization, something in the human condition that makes stillness feel like a confrontation. Productivity culture didn't create that discomfort. It monetized it. It built an entire architecture of busyness to ensure you never have to sit with it long enough to understand what it's actually telling you. Stillness is not emptiness. It is the original frequency. You attuned to it before anyone told you to be anything. There's a moment, and you may have felt it briefly, maybe on a slow morning, or at the edge of sleep, where the list disappears, where you're not ahead of anything or behind anything, where the self stops auditing itself. That moment is not a reward for productivity. It is not the thing you earn after the tasks are done. It is the thing you were before the tasks. The tyranny of productivity is quiet, precisely because it never announces itself as tyranny. It arrives as virtue, as discipline, as self-respect. And the cost is paid so slowly, in such small daily installments that the bill never seems to come. But you felt it today, sitting here, wherever you are. Some small resistance to simply being in this moment without making it count. Notice that. Don't fix it. Don't add it to a list of things to work on. Just notice it. That noticing, unhurried, unscheduled, leading nowhere, is the beginning of something the optimization frameworks cannot touch. It's already yours. It always was.